very much also to the organizers of the conference and, of course, to the editors of the book. It was really an exciting experience for me to be a part of this project, but I think it's really filling a gap we have. So thank you again. As Professor Sharipal said, I was born in Austria. Perhaps you are wondering on my surname. It's an Egyptian one. So my mother was from Austria and my father from Egypt, so really Central Europe, yeah, in this way. I had, as already Professor Sharipal mentioned, I have 5 authors to work with. We have the 3 ones on this picture. They are the ones that I wrote in the book, which have Ignaz Seiper, Otto von Habsburg, and Erhard Busseck. Ignaz Seiper was the first president of the Republic of Austria after the monarchy. Then we have Otto von Habsburg, and he is known by everybody. He already also said that he was really feeling as a Hungarian, not also an Austrian, but also his feelings were like a Hungarian researcher. And the third one is Erhard von Busseck, which is almost a contemporary author. As you can see, he passed away in 2022. These are the 3 ones. Then I had 2 more, which I prepared for this presentation, which is Richard Coudenhove-Kalergi, and the last one, Cardinal König, Cardinal Franz König. So these are really 5 important thinkers. When I prepared for this presentation, I was thinking on the methodology. How should I present 5 different and very exciting thinkers to you? I had several steps, and at the end I focused on 7 points, let's say 7 principles, which, according to my opinion, come out of each of these thinkers. So I will present to you 7 principles on European thinking. It might be the 7 principles of a highly engaged European thinker or something like that. This was the point. Of course, several of them are also very much connected. Here we have Ignaz Seiper, Coudenhove-Kalergi, and Habsburg Otto. They were connected through the pan-European movement, because Coudenhove-Kalergi was like the founder of the pan-European movement. Ignaz Seiper was the one who very much supported this in the beginning, and the first Congress of the pan-European movement was organized in Vienna under the presidency of Ignaz Seiper, and as we might know, Otto von Habsburg became president of the pan-European movement after Coudenhove-Kalergi. So they are also somehow connected one with the other. Here on the other side we have the logo of the pan-European movement. Perhaps I will come back to it. So the 7 principles. The first principle I thought is all of those authors were very much open-minded. Here I have a quotation from Cardinal König, with an openness and curiosity, no fear of contact with unfamiliar. I think this is also important. Being open to other languages, to other peoples, and to be able to consider other opinions. If we think that, for instance, Ignaz Seiper, he was the first president of Austria after the monarchy, he was very much convinced that the monarchy is the best form of ruling a state. But at the same time, he was able to connect with other ideas. He was a Catholic priest, and he was at the same time able to work together with Otto Bauer, who was a very convinced socialist. Actually, Otto Bauer and Ignaz Seiper, they brought together the Constitution of Austria, the the constitution which is still in force. And Hans Kelsen, he is considered to be the architect nowadays of the Constitution of Austria. And he said it was the merit of these two men that they were able to work together to bring forward the constitution. If we think on Otto von Habsburg, like the son of the last emperor somehow, in different stages of the history, he was always able to find his place and to promote his ideas. We have also a quotation I bring in the book when he said, the best form of the state is the one which best serves the government and best serves, at the end he said, natural law. Independent of how we think on natural law, he was like putting the state form in service to values bringing forward. So I think, or even Coudenhove-Kalergi, he was very much convinced on the point that we should put together the pan-European movement together with France. When he realized that it's not possible, he opened to this Central European approach. So I think this is one of the points that we can discover on each of those thinkers, that they were very much open-minded. And I think this is also an interesting point for modern discussion. The second point I have, this was, of course, the idea of federalism that we have. Federalism, here I have also a quotation from Otto von Habsburg, which I find very interesting, when he was saying, expand territory without being imperialistic on a contractual organization. And also the first one from Ignaz Seiper, when he said he is very much convinced that Europe should go on after the monarchy in some kind of federalistic organization. So this is one point which might be like the second, federalism in a contractual manner, in a contractual form of working together within Europe. And here, of course, we have the ideas of state and national opinions. And this brings me to my second point, which is the rejection of nationalism. I brought here a completely different approach, which are these 40 days on Mustarak. Franz Werfer was a good friend of Otto von Habsburg, and he had discussions on him. And in this book, we find a quotation from another point of view, when one of the personalities, one of the actors in the book say, nationalism fills the burning board of Allah. In this point, leaves behind when he is expelled from the human heart. So what is meant by this quote is that when we empty our heart from other values, then nationalism came into the play and into the ground. Ignaz Seiper, he was a scholar, of course, and he made a distinction between a nation and a state. And his approach was that nation is like a group of similar people who are able to work together, to have some similarities, or at least to be able to find some similarities in the way of working together. And he was focusing very much on the idea of nation, so that people should focus on their way of working together, on finding cultural approaches in order that they should be able to understand each other. And all this work was supposed to be done within the nations. And then he said the nation should be put together in a broader context, which was the idea of state. The state was like a functional point of view, a functional approach to the state, but she said it's a community of interest in order to serve the common good. This was the idea of Seiper. And it's interesting because he wrote this book regarding the end of the First World War, when he was still thinking how people could continue at this point. So I think this is also an interesting point on federalism, when we see one hand working together, on the other hand a rejection of all kind of nationalism. We can be a patriot, of course, and we should be a patriot, but at the same time we should avoid exaggeration in this point, being able of working together. And I think this is also an item we find in all these five people we have here. Then we have a next point, that they were all focusing on free economy. Here I brought also another author, which is Wilhelm Röpke, which was a rather liberal author, but after World War II, he focused on working out economic system in Europe based on the social teaching of the Catholic Church. Röpke himself was not a Catholic. It's an interesting point. And I have a PhD students, we have a PhD students at Basman. She compared the ideas of Röpke to the ideas of Janusz Linsky, and it's an interesting point. So Röpke, what he was saying here, I bring a quotation, was that the market economy is not everything. We find several approaches and several quotations by these five authors focusing on a free market economy, but the free market economy must have another point. So the market economy is not everything. It must find its place in a higher order of things, which is not ruled by supply and demand, which we see on the other hand, which might be supply and demand. It must be firmly contained with an all-embracing order of society, which is the imperfections of harshness of economic freedom and corrected by law, and in which man is not denied conditions of life appropriate to his nature. So at the one hand, we have the idea of the free market. On the other hand, we have the idea of other values. And these other values are supposed to be found in the teaching of the church, but we can also say in the social thought of the church. When we use this item, a social thought of the church, we mean the works of everybody before the encyclicals, because we know the encyclicals, they started only in the 19th century, and there were already a lot of thinking on social issues within the church before the encyclicals. Ignaz Seiper, he wrote his thesis of habilitation as a theologian on the social thought of the church. Otto von Habsburg, on several occasions, he is quoting the social teaching of the church. And we have also Erhard Busek, which is very much connected. Coudenhove-Kalergi has an interesting approach. It's also a quotation in the book, when he says that we should approach social ethics together with the Enlightenment. And if you remember the logo of the Pan-European movement, we have a cross, this red cross in the middle, and the golden background, which actually means the social values and Christian ethics on the background of the Enlightenment. So it's also an interesting point. Here I took from an Austrian-American scholar, Martin Schlag, this idea. These are the principles of the social teaching of the church, which are in tension one to another, and they form like a social tent. So if you take one away, the tent will not hold. If you have experience on building up a tent, you must put all the points together. We have human dignity, of course, it's very close to us. We have solidarity, and we find this idea of solidarity in all of the authors I dealt with. And we find the idea of subsidiarity, which is very much known, that it's one of the basic principles of the European Union. But subsidiarity means also that you should be able to enable people to fulfill their tasks in the proper environment. This is also an important point. And then we have the idea of common goods and the end, which is also quoted by almost all the authors I dealt with. Common good, if we focus on a material approach, so common good, if we share it, it becomes less. If we have a cake and we share the cake. Yesterday we had a very nice dinner already. No, if we share the cake, so everybody will have a smaller part of the cake. But they say also in spiritual goods, if we share them, they don't become less. They grow. And this is also the idea of common good we find in this point. So we have the social, which is another principle of European thinkers. We find it in all of them. Is the social teaching and the social thought of the church. Then we have another point, which is cultural collaboration and the knowledge of the languages of the region, which is, I think, also a very important point. Now everybody is using, of course, the English language with a new lingua franca, and we are already used to it. But also in Ignaz Seiper we find it, and of course it is very much known in Otto von Habsburg, that he promoted very much the knowledge of the language in the region. And also Erhard Busek, who during a time was Minister of Education in Austria, he also promoted this point of mutual cultural understanding. And he said that schools and universities are the proper point where this mutual cultural understanding should be fostered. And so this is another really exciting and important point, that we say we should study the languages, we should learn the languages of all those countries we have around. And make also an exchange of languages, which is also always a point of cultural understanding and of promoting mutual cultural understanding. And then we have the next point, which is the big question, which countries should belong to this part of the European integration. And when we focus of all the authors I dealt with, these were the countries of around the river Danube, which is Central Europe. If we think on the point when Busek also, when Erhard Busek wrote his books on Mitteleuropa, they were thinking if really it's true that we feel very much closed to the countries around the Danube, or we should focus on Germany, because when we say from Austria we have a common language with Germany and with Switzerland. But then Busek also says, no, what is the point we have together one with another? And so he said the common history, and he includes the Ottoman occupation. He also includes Enlightenment, French Revolution, Napoleonic War, and the nation states of the 19th century and of the First World War. And if I have another point, Otto von Habsburg there, he has a very interesting point when he listens the countries that should take part in this point. In the first point he puts Hungary, which is an interesting point, which reveals a lot of his thinking. Then he puts Bohemia, Moravia, Slovakia, Slovenia, Croatia, Austria, and an interesting point, Bavaria at the end. So these are the countries which, according to Otto von Habsburg, should be part of this European project. So also I brought this quotation from Coudenhove-Kalergi, who had a completely different idea in the beginning, but his approach to this European collaboration was an economic one, when he said that principle from an economic point of view, those countries should be able to work together. So this was like the idea of making up 7 principles on European integration that can be found in all of these authors, and that might be like be a summary of the contributions I had the occasion to work with. So thank you for your attention.